Welcome back to our news bulletin. We start with news on coronavirus pandemic as the worldwide death toll has crossed 190,000 with over 2.7 million people infected. In the US, more than 3,000 people died in the last 24 hours, bringing the death count to nearly 50,000. Further details in this report.
Scientists across the world are speeding up efforts to study the novel coronavirus in order to develop a vaccine. US government researchers have revealed the virus survives best indoors and in dry conditions. They say COVID-19 loses potency when temperatures and humidity rise, and especially when it is exposed to sunlight. President Donald Trump said the findings should be interpreted cautiously, but predicted people will be eager to leave the house by summer.
To keep America gaining momentum, every citizen needs to maintain the vigilance, and we all understand that very well. We've gone over it many, many times. This includes practicing good hygiene, maintaining social distance, and the voluntary use of face covering.
Governments around the world are cautiously retreating lockdown measures under immense economic pressures. South Africa will partially reopen the economy on May 1st, easing travel restrictions. Meanwhile, over in Asia, Indonesia and the Philippines have extended the lockdowns. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte says capital Manila will be under restrictions until May 15th. The country has one of the world's strictest community quarantines to curb the coronavirus infections.
If you continue the lawlessness, and it's happening all over the Philippines, maybe I will declare martial law because you rebels are disrupting the help and supplies being given to the people.
In China, the National Health Commission said half of the imported cases in the country have been discharged from hospitals after recovery. Meanwhile, 91 crew of the Italian cruise ship docked in Japan's southwestern port of Nagasaki have been infected with the coronavirus.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the number of coronavirus cases has jumped past 11,000, with nearly 650 infections reported in the last 24 hours. The health ministry said 13 more people have died, bringing the toll to 237. The ministry said 2,527 patients have recovered from the disease so far. It said the ratio of locally transmitted cases is at 79%, while the tally of active cases is almost 8,400. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has pledged to provide ventilators to Pakistan for the coronavirus victims. In a briefing, President Trump said Pakistan has asked to send ventilators, and he has agreed to do so. In another news, Yemen's Houthi rebels have ruled out any unrealistic agreements with the Saudi-led coalition fighting in the country. In a meeting of the Supreme Political Council, President Mahdi al-Mashat accused the coalition of escalating violence after agreeing to a truce. The meeting comes after a 2-week ceasefire expired yesterday, with no permanent deal in its place to end the fighting. The Houthis said coalition forces killed several people last night in 7 raids in the oil-rich Marib province. Yemen's coalition forces have blamed the Houthis for repeatedly violating ceasefire and the failure to agree to an extension. The United Nations has warned Israel against annexing parts of the occupied West Bank. In a statement, UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Nikolai Mladenov, said such unilateral actions are a serious violation of international law and will only lead to more conflict and suffering. Mladenov said Israel's annexation plan will mark a devastating blow to the two-state solution. He said the annexation will close the door to a renewal of negotiations and threaten efforts to advance regional peace. Earlier, the EU's foreign policy chief Josep Borrell said the bloc does not recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Palestinian territory. Borrell said the EU will continue to monitor the situation and its broader implications and will act accordingly. Israel's unity government has announced it will begin advancing annexation plans from July 1st. Russia has lauded Turkey's efforts in northwestern Syria's Idlib that aim to eliminate radical groups. Foreign Ministry spokesperson said Moscow expects Ankara to separate opposition groups from what it called terrorists in the region. Maria Zakharova said this separation work has been met with active resistance from radical groups remaining in the de-escalation zone. Last month, Ankara and Moscow agreed to cease all military actions along the line of contact in the Idlib de-escalation area. Joint Russian-Turkish patrols along the M4 were part of the deal reached after 34 Turkish soldiers were killed in Syria. In Germany's court, war crime charges have been read out against 2 members of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's security services. The holding of the trial has been hailed by rights activists. They say this is the first step towards accountability for war criminals who served Damascus during the Syrian civil war. This report has details.
Thousands of Syrians have accused regime forces of crimes over the course of the brutal civil war, which also includes the indiscriminate bombing of residential areas and medical facilities. These reports have been repeatedly rejected by officials in Damascus, including Assad himself. One suspect has been charged with 58 murders in Germany, while the other with facilitating the torture of at least 30 opposition activists. The 2 also face charges of other heinous crimes against humanity, including torture and rape.
So they committed the crime with cold blood. Now it's everything changed. There is no way to have immunity or to escape from punishment. Immunity time is over for all of them.
Speaking to the press, the plaintiff's lawyer said this trial is a direct message to the Syrian capital. He added his clients came forward against the defendants at great personal risk.
It's above all important that this trial is taking place. I think a lot of people, including our clients, have waited for a very long time that this finally takes off. It was a huge challenge for them to step out of the shadow and to speak about these crimes for the first time ever. That's impossible in Syria and tied to big risks.
It remains to be seen how consequential this trial will be for Syria and its allies. The country is not a signatory to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court in The Hague. An estimated 400,000 Syrians have been killed since the war began in 2011.
South Korea says neighboring North Korea has unusually increased its combat readiness operations. Defense Minister Jeong Kyung-do said Pyongyang is carrying out Air Force operations and inspecting its artillery's readiness. State media quoted Kyung-do saying North's maneuvers have heightened regional tensions. He said Pyongyang is concentrating on developing weapons while remaining unresponsive to offers for talks. Earlier, a military official said the DPRK has increased its surveillance activities in the skies near the demarcation line with China over the Yellow Sea. North Korea has conducted an unprecedented 5 major weapon tests this year, along with smaller-scale artillery firing drills. U.S. President Donald Trump says the recent media report on Kim Jong-un's failing health is incorrect. During a White House briefing, Trump said the report used outdated documents to draw speculations. Trump's comments come 2 days after he said the U.S. does not know if the information was true. Earlier on Monday, it was reported that the North Korean leader was in grave danger after undergoing a cardiovascular procedure. Trump said he has a good relationship with Kim.
Very well with him. Here we are. You would have been in a war with North Korea if I didn't get elected president. Remember, I was going to be the one that took us into war my first day in office, okay? Here we are. Look at what's happened. Withdrawal. We're bringing people home. We're not going to serve as policemen all over the world. I don't want to be policemen all over the world.
But have you been able to leverage?
And yet I've rebuilt our military to a level that it's never been built at before. But it's never recognized by the fake news.
The U.S. House of Representatives has overwhelmingly approved a $484 billion coronavirus relief bill. U.S. President Donald Trump has promised to sign the measure into law that passed the Democratic-led House by a vote of 388 to 5. The latest of 4 relief bills will fund small businesses and hospitals amid the pandemic that has killed over 49,000 Americans. It has thrown a record 26 million people out of work. The legislation pushed the total spending response to the crisis to an unprecedented $3 trillion. A handful of lawmakers opposed the legislation, including Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who urged Congress to do even more.
The only folks that they have urgency around are folks like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and Shake Shack. Those are the people getting assistance in this bill. You are not trying to fix this bill for mom and pops, and we have to fight to fund hospitals, fighting to fund testing. That is what we're fighting for in this bill. It is unconscionable. If you had urgency, you would legislate like rent was due on May 1st and make sure that we include rent and mortgage relief for our constituents.
Meanwhile, a congressional report said U.S. educational institutions face a $15 billion loss in revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In another news, EU leaders have agreed to build a €1 trillion emergency fund to help the bloc recover from COVID-19 pandemic. In a video conference to consider proposals, EU leaders rallied around a bigger common budget for 2020-2027, along with a recovery program. French President Emmanuel Macron argued that the step will put a burden on already heavily indebted countries like Italy, Belgium and Greece. EU leaders also approved over €500 billion in an immediate scheme to protect jobs, businesses and offer cheap credit to governments.
We also agreed to work towards establishing a recovery fund which is needed and urgent. This fund should be of a sufficient magnitude, targeted towards the sectors and geographical parts of Europe most affected, and be dedicated to dealing with this unprecedented crisis.
The Saudi presidency of the Group of 20 major economies has called for more funds for the coronavirus response. In a statement, the presidency said $1.8 billion have been donated towards a target of $8 billion. The G20 Secretariat said the donations were made by countries, philanthropic organizations and the private sector. Saudi G20 member Sherpa Fahad said global solidarity and cooperation is needed to fight the pandemic. He said it is the time for the bloc to support world efforts for a vaccine and other therapeutic measures to combat COVID-19. Meanwhile, the G20 tourism ministers will hold a virtual meeting today to discuss impact of the virus on the travel sector. Libya's UN-recognized government of national accord has rejected the European Union's plan to monitor the arms embargo on Libya. The spokesperson of President Fayez al-Sarraj, Hamid al-Zawi, says the GNA was not consulted over the decision. In a message to the UN Security Council, al-Zawi said this act is a violation of UNSC resolutions. He said the EU has failed to differentiate between the aggressor and affected parties. Al-Zawi said the European Union plan neglects monitoring the air and eastern land borders of Libya. Khalifa Haftar-led Eastern Army denied GNA's accusation of using chemical weapons in the Salahuddin axis. The GNA said a civilian was killed in an attack on the Anzara region by the Eastern Army. The World Health Organization has warned that the number of deaths caused by malaria in sub-Saharan Africa can double to 769,000. This comes as efforts to tackle the disease face disruptions due to the coronavirus pandemic. At a media briefing, WHO Regional Director for Africa, Matshidiso Moeti, urged all countries to move quickly to save lives. He said the focus on slowing the spread of COVID-19 can lead to a 75% reduction in access to anti-malaria medicines. The region has registered more than 26,000 cases of COVID-19, while almost 1,250 have died so far. In 2018, there were 213 million malaria cases and 360,000 related deaths in the African region. The World Health Organization says it will announce a landmark collaboration today to speed the development of coronavirus vaccine. In a statement, the health agency said the initiative with partners aims to make technologies against the virus accessible to everyone worldwide. In addition to 194 UN states, the GAVI Vaccine Alliance, Gates Foundation and Global Fund are among traditionally large donors to the agency. Meanwhile, Canada has pledged $782 million to develop and eventually mass-produce vaccines to fight coronavirus. Yesterday, the UK started its human trials for the COVID-19 vaccine. The trial drug has been developed by the University of Oxford and Imperial. In another rather devastating development, a potential drug for the coronavirus failed in its first randomized clinical trial. There had been widespread hope that remdesivir can treat COVID-19, but a Chinese trial showed that the drug had not been successful. The Rolling Stones have released their first single in 8 years dedicated to the coronavirus pandemic. The song Living in a Ghost Town is powered with a riff by Keith Richards. The video shows deserted streets and subway stations in London, Los Angeles, Kyoto, among other cities. Song Life was so beautiful, now we all got locked down, feel like a ghost living in a ghost town. In a statement, Sir Mick Jagger said the band thought they will resonate with the times the world is living in. The band said the track was initially recorded a year ago in LA but was finished in lockdown. Richard said the song was completed via satellite before being released. On a coronavirus ward in a London hospital, award-winning filmmaker Hassan Akkad is working as a cleaner. In an interview, Akkad said he is glad to join the fight against the pandemic in his adopted home. More in this report.
The 32-year-old Syrian refugee has lived in London for 4 years. He made a footage of his journey, surviving a sinking dinghy from Turkey into Europe and then to UK. The film was part of a documentary series which won BAFTA in 2017 and International Emmy Awards. With the outbreak of the disease, he saw a way to thank the community that had helped him becoming a cleaner at Webb's Cross Hospital.
I've had a positive experience, and that's naturally led me to think that this is now become like home, you know, like this is where my friends and people that are now like my family live. And I wanted to pay it forward to the community that welcomed me with open arms.
Every shift, Akkad and his colleagues need to disinfect every inch of a ward treating COVID-19 patients, all while wearing personal protective equipment that can leave him sweating and out of breath. He says he wants to tell the story of the pandemic in his community, as well as promoting causes he is passionate about.
I am going to keep doing this job until I can physically and mentally be able to, no matter how long it takes. And when this is done, you know, I'm a storyteller. And I do want to tell that story, I want to tell the hundreds of stories that I'm seeing and witnessing on a daily basis in my hospital, from the people that I work with and from the patients that I interact with.
Akkad, however, bemoaned the lack of funding for the state-run National Health Service. The 32-year-old said he hopes the crisis would lead to more respect and value for cleaners and porters, who usually receive lower wages than most. Once the pandemic is over, Akkad wishes to turn his attention back to filmmaking and storytelling.
Now, starting today, millions of people around the world are observing the holy month of Ramadan. Let's find out more in this report.
This year, the fasting month has arrived amid social restrictions in place due to the coronavirus pandemic. Many Muslim-majority countries, including Indonesia, Saudi Arabia and UAE, have asked their citizens to stay at home.
Salat dimanapun.
For me, no matter where we are, the prayers must go on, even though we cannot pray in the mosque. The religious heads in the country have advised us to pray in our home. As a follower, all we can do is follow the instructions and do as we are told. As for the rest, we will leave it to God.
Para ulama di negeri ini.
Saudi Arabia's King Salman said he is saddened that Muslims cannot pray at mosques because of social restrictions, but in certain countries of the world, including Pakistan, the government urged people to pray at home but did not impose a ban. Medics have warned of dire consequences.
The Prime Minister has said that any mosque which does not follow the SOPs will be closed. Mr. Prime Minister, sir, it will be too late by then. When you realize this after a week or 10 days, lots of people will be searching for hospital beds. Many hospitals will be having ventilator problems.
In Ramadan, observant Muslims refrain from eating and drinking from dawn to dusk. The month of Ramadan will begin from tomorrow in Pakistan and certain other countries.
The UK's economy is crumbling under the strain of coronavirus lockdown as government borrowing surges to the highest levels in peacetime history. Bank of England interest rate setter Jan Viale said Britain's economy is experiencing the fastest and deepest contraction in centuries. Partly, he said, the economic situation will have exacerbated if the government and Bank of England had not used unprecedented financial firepower. The UK's PMI plummeted to a new record low at just 12.9 for April, down from 36 in March. This was far below economists' forecasts and well short of the 38.1 reading recorded in the depths of 2008 financial crisis. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has announced a $22.7 billion package to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, the bank said the comprehensive package will cover the period between 2020 and 2021. It said the components include resilience framework, trade finance, restructuring support for new clients, and vital infrastructure. The package will focus on sectors hardest hit by the crisis, such as tourism, finance, manufacturing, and agribusiness. The World Bank says most commodity prices are expected to drop significantly in 2020 amid the economic fallout from COVID-19 pandemic. In its April Commodity Markets Outlook report, the bank said almost all prices saw a sharp decline in the past 3 months. The bank said monthly average crude oil prices plunged 50% between January and March. It said crude oil prices are expected to average $35 per barrel in 2020, a sharp downward revision from the October forecast. The report said overall energy prices, including natural gas and coal, are expected to average 40% lower in 2020, but will rebound in 2021. It said metal prices are projected to decline over 13% in 2020, while food prices are expected to be broadly stable. European stock markets are trading lower as reports of the failure of a COVID-19 vaccine sink investors' hopes. Investors are treading cautiously as major companies announce quarterly earnings. Frankfurt stocks and CAC 40 in Paris have lost over 1.5%. London's FTSE 100 is trading nearly 1.5% lower after official data revealed British retail sales fell at the fastest rate on record in March. Nestlé posted better than expected results for the first quarter, reporting over 4% rise in organic sales. Meanwhile, lighting manufacturer Signify surged to the top of the European benchmark despite firm reporting a 39% year-on-year decline in net profit. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the losses, closing over 1% lower, while Shanghai Composite lost ground. Nikkei 225 is trading 0.75% lower as shares of Tokyo Electron fell over 2.5%. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil price has plunged nearly 2.5% to below $21. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.